4. Hello, people of Earth. For it is I, Jason, and everybody's joining around the old virtual Twitch to ask the question they ask each and every week. And that question is, hey, did you see this one? Now, it's worth noting that Cillian dances every single week, but there's no music playing.
And the camera can't see him either.
Also,
like it's not showing him.
Hello, everybody on the Twitchosphere. It is us. Hey, did you see this one? My name is Jason, but I am not your host tonight. It is Steve's birthday month. Steve,
happy birthday!
Take it away. And also on top of that, it is much like somehow 2 months in a row, we're doing an episode on our actual birthday. So, Cillian, you better have an episode on your birthday, or else this year is going to be thrown in the toilet. Take it away, Sleeve, and happy birthday, buddy.
Hi, thank you. Yes, it is my birthday. I was born on this day many years ago. But we're gathered here to speak on a movie that I loved when I saw it in theaters many, many years ago. The film is Sunshine, a movie made in 2017 by Danny Boyle. It's a science fiction psychological thriller, I guess is what you'd call it. Yeah, I was not really huge into Danny Boyle at the time, but I did like 28 Days Later, and so I was semi-excited to see this. Not so much because he was making it, because I like space. I love space stuff. And this movie is a space stuff movie.
Oh, yeah.
So we do have a guest today, my friend Matthew Philp, Dr. Matt Philp.
Doctor?
I think there's a very good chance that you and I saw this movie together. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't see why we wouldn't have. We saw almost all movies together all the dang time back then. So I guess we'll let you introduce yourself, and why don't you tell us about the first time that you saw the movie Sunshine, directed by Danny Boyle in 2017, a science fiction thriller.
Yeah, what year did it come out?
2007.
Where was I?
Where was I in 2007?
Yeah, probably most definitely seen it with you. I definitely saw it in theaters, and I would have not seen it with anyone else. So probably you.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question? I'm lost already.
Well, when was the first time you saw it? And
when it was probably in theaters.
Yeah.
2007. What did I think of it?
Any memories you can remember from that time?
Yeah, like what's your history with the movie?
I probably saw it at the Cineplex Orion Gate. What year did Children of Men come out?
2005, I think.
I want to say that was
2006.
2006, yeah.
Yeah, it was like those two movies, and for the longest time, like if anyone asked me what were my favorite movies, Children of Men and this movie. And I haven't watched either of them in so long until a few months ago. Watched Sunshine. So yeah, so it had an impact on me as a young, probably 20-year-old.
Did it hold up to your memory?
No, it did not.
They rarely do.
Yeah.
Sometimes they exceed your memory.
True.
You like them better.
Like The Complete Owl, right, guys? The Complete Owl.
Your that thing that's not a movie?
Done?
Yeah.
It's still very good visually and stuff, and it's fun, and I don't know. But I think it's just maybe it's my old age. The Danny Boyle style of, what else do you do? Like the beach, not the island, the beach.
Slumdog, Transpotting.
The beach
and
with
same with 28 Days Later and this one. Like there was a series of like 3 or 4 movies he did where at the end, the last like 20 minutes is just like the most. It's like uncut gems. It's just anxiety, like weird camera shots and fast movements. You're just like, stop it. But
yeah,
it just induces so much anxiety that when I watched it with my wife, she was like, yeah, turn this off. It's causing too much anxiety. Like I was like, there's only 10 minutes left. It's like,
you mean there's 10 more minutes of this?
Yeah.
Well, that it is one of the most popular critiques of this movie, I'd say, or one of the things that many people say is that the movie kind of falls apart in the end. I kind of like
No,
it.
it
I
doesn't.
think. Well, a lot of people say that. I'm just saying that a lot of people.
Well, then all
They're
the Danny Boyle movies fall apart in the last 10 minutes.
That's true.
listen. I'm not saying I'm
The
saying this.
Beach
I'm
has the
saying
same
people
vibe as
out
this
there in the
movie.
world. But yeah, it's just a tonal shift, a huge tonal shift from the rest of the movie. It goes from sort of this, ensemble cast of interesting people on a mission and dealing with the hardships that come along with that mission to just a crazy fucking monster movie for the last like 10 minutes.
For some reason. Last
Yeah.
30 minutes, it just turns into fucking Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, for some reason, but also I think it's great. I think like if they just got to the sun and dumped their load into it, it would have been like, eh. And there's, because they're a team, you don't want to make one of them go crazy because they're already pretty like they're losing it. They're getting cabin fever, but they're not insane. The psychiatrist is sort of like becoming a little bit crazier, but it would be too much, I think, if he just went full bananas and started killing everybody. So what do? They throw another character at you that is basically suffering from the same issue, I guess. Like he became obsessed with the sun. Anyway, we'll talk about the plot of the movie after the rest of these guys tell us about their first times seeing this. I guess, my history with the movie is similar to Matt's. I saw it with him in the theater, and I don't know if I would have said it was one of my favorite movies back then or now, but it is definitely a great movie that I haven't seen in a very long time. So I'm glad that I selected it. I'll say it does hold up for me, but it is a little bit much. And Danny Boyle as a filmmaker, he was at sort of the height of his evolution, I guess, as a filmmaker. So it's interesting to go back and see this. But yeah, we'll go.
I think at the time too, I was very much a contrarian of when I found something I liked that no one else really knew about it, I like doubled down and like triple liked it. And like this was one of those movies where it's like no one heard about it. It was in theaters
it wasn't
for like
really.
Actually, I think I remember it now. I think we had to go somewhere. Like it wasn't playing in all the theaters. We had to go to a different theater to see it.
Oh yeah,
We like drove all the way to Square One.
I remember that as well. Because what me and Matt and our other friend Andrew used to do, when we would just like gather around a computer when we were younger and just watch trailers every Friday. Like, let's watch all the trailers that came out this week, and then we would decide what we're gonna go see over the next like 6 months based on like watching trailers every Friday. Jason, what is your history with the movie Sunshine?
It's interesting that you picked this one. I know that the theme of the month is like isolation movies. We did like specifically sci-fi isolation spaceship things. Considering we're doing Event Horizon, were you joking about doing Castaway?
No, I switched it, and Tim is our guest for that.
Okay,
one, so
that's
yeah.
fantastic because that's going to be a good palate cleanser after all this fucking. I'm stuck in a spaceship of varying quality.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on an island spaceship.
Yeah.
It's basically the same concept.
It's true. It's true. This movie is perfect for the theme of our podcast as a whole, though, because the conceit of the podcast from the beginning has been sort of like, what are movies that, like, you're at a party and you're talking to somebody, and then you say, hey, did you see this movie? And, like, a lot of our stuff is that. And this one, at the time, very much was like, hey, did you see Sunshine? It's crazy. It's groundbreaking. It's the guy that made The Beach. Remember The Beach? And I remember, I never saw it until this week. Like, I watched it yesterday, but I do remember it. I remember wondering what it was, and then I talk about this on the show a lot, how straight sci-fi and straight fantasy I'm not the biggest fan of. It's more so when they genre bend. John Carpenter does this very well. He'll take a couple genres and jam them together to make something like They Live. This movie is a thriller. It's a sci-fi. It's a horror. And it also has like a little bit of like not time travel but time bend, and I think that's that last 10 minutes of them being in that cube room. They mention at the very beginning of the movie that like when we get to that point, time's not going to make any sense, and I think that was Danny Boyle sort of trying to like convey that on screen, but I don't think he did it very well. It just kind of comes off as like
Kind of a hard concept to
exactly.
represent.
But I've seen
visually.
that like timelessness done better. But it comes off very artsy in this one. but it does remind me a lot of The Beach when Leo's like losing his mind in the woods. Kind of reminds me of that stuff. Which that's another Danny Boyle movie I actually watched for the first time recently. I'd never seen The Beach, even though in 2000 all my friends were like, "That's the best movie ever. We're 15." So yeah, I'm a girl. I'm a 60-year-old girl, and I love Leo. Look at his little chest.
Yeah, I watched The Beach recently as well, and I was like, "Wait, there's no monsters in this?"
No.
I thought that there was like cannibals or something.
It's weed dealers.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of drug dealers,
but just weed. Like it's a weed field on the other side of paradise.
Like
anyway,
sitting there waiting for a cannibal to show up the whole goddamn movie, and no cannibals showed up.
I had no fucking clue that this monster movie is also like a genre that just gets wrapped into this whole thing too. Like it just turns into like a monster terrorizing their spaceship for like 15 minutes at one point. That's like you don't know if it's happening or not. Also, like it's like he's just there doing some like calculations or whatever, and then like the monster starts attacking, and you're like, where the fuck? How did this monster get on board? Anyway, that's more stuff we'll talk about when we get into the body of it. But in summation, I watched it yesterday, but remember it very vividly, and remember wondering what the fuck this was. It an indie movie? Like at the time, was this like a low budget
it's not
thing?
it's not a massive budget. I mean, for the time, it's still pretty big, but I think the budget was like 40 million or something.
Yeah,
which, considering
so, like, middle of the
how
road.
good it still looks in terms of visual effects, it's like pretty amazing to think about.
There's not a lot of like overwhelming CGI in this.
No, and the CGI they do have is very seamlessly done. Like it doesn't feel aged. A lot of these types of movies, you go back and you're like, ugh, that spaceship
outside of the
that
ship
looked great.
Outside of the ship shots, when the those things on the outside of the ship all go down at the same time, like that was clearly CGI, but like a lot of the other stuff was very like practical looking. The shield. Fucking shield.
Yeah. I think gold is, in particular, a reflective gold is a difficult thing to animate in CGI. If you go back and watch like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies with like the gold coins
or Sphere.
Yeah, true. Or anytime there's a coin that's digital, there's just something about it that looks off compared to an actual polished piece of metal.
Yeah, because they made those movies for CRT TVs back then. The CRT TV, like flat screen TVs, were also like went to 720p max, so everything sort of melded together. But when you watch all these movies from that era, from about 1998 to about 2008, on a 4K TV, the CGI, I've mentioned this before, the CGI almost feels like a different like a different level in front of everything, so it sticks out like a sore thumb.
All right, Kaylin, why don't you tell us about the first time that you saw the movie Sunshine?
My first time was Monday, I believe, and then again
that blows
today.
my mind. This is another one that I figured you would have just owned for years. Sorry.
This, for some reason, I don't recall ever hearing of it, or like as far as like promos, trailers, or whatever kind of thing. Like none of that kind of rings any bells. People mentioning it to me, that doesn't ring any bells. This is like my first experience with it. Cool. And to your guys' point earlier, I don't think it exactly falls apart during the last like half hour or whatever, but it is definitely a tonal switch for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit heady for some people, I think, in terms of like a madman who's crispy shows up and it's like, I'm God or whatever. You're like, ugh.
I've looked in the eyes of God and it is the sun or whatever.
I'm God's favorite son and so is the sun and I'm here to deliver you to God. All right, I guess we can just jump into the plot of the movie. Just like as a,
we're not talking about we're talking about Danny Boyle a lot, but like this is an Alex Garland movie.
Yeah, you wrote it, right?
Yeah.
But Alex Garland, I believe, also works with Danny Boyle quite a bit.
Yeah, he did 28 Days Later as well, and the other one, The Beach.
The Beach.
But then, like, you then start to see like the weirdness too, because then he did Annihilation, which is kind of gets a little weird.
That movie's awesome. I like that movie a lot. And Ex
so, like,
Machina.
I feel like, because then when you look at some of it's still the Danny Boyle style of movie. When you look at some of the other Danny Boyle movies that he did, that's not an Alex Garland thing, but you see the Alex Garland-ish thing when they've gone their separate ways. You see, like, you can split them apart now. But when I realized that Then I was like, oh,
Would
it's
you
the
say
same
Alex
guy.
Garland is like the skeleton, and then Boyle puts the meat and muscles on it?
He does. Boyle puts the fast cuts,
Yes.
in blurry shots.
Yeah, and you don't see Danny Boyle writing full video games either.
Yeah, he was the script supervisor on Devil May Cry in 2013.
The shitty new one.
He also wrote one of my favorite movies ever made, Dread, 2012. Love that movie.
And recently Men.
At some point.
Men, which I haven't seen, but it's one of those.
I saw Men.
Yeah,
I liked Men.
Fucked up, right?
It's very fucked up. Afterwards, Danny said, "Why do you make me watch things like this?" And I said, "You could have said no."
You could have said no. You could have looked at a trailer and saw that.
Also, you were talking to the movie a couple
same
times.
Face.
Danny doesn't do it all the time, but every once in a while they'll like be watching a movie and they'll just start talking to the movie, and I'll be like, "You tell him."
Like, don't go in there, kind of thing.
Or like, this guy gets it. You get it, man. You understand. And Men was one of those movies because it is so fucking weird. For those who haven't seen, Men is basically a movie about a woman whose husband commits suicide. So she goes on like sort of not a staycation. She goes on a vacation to like a very nice cottage, summer home, sort of manor home in the middle of the country. I think they're in Ireland, but I could be wrong, or they might be in northern England. I can't remember the exact location, but in the movie, in her mind, she sees every single man as the same man, like basically saying like all men are the same kind of thing. So it's like literally the same actor is portraying every single man in the village, and even like the young boy that she runs into is like him like digitally put onto like a 12-year-old's body. It's very
which
weird.
Is always jarring.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of like folklore kind of wrapped into it involving the Green Man, which if you've ever seen the Green Knight, it's essentially like the same character, just in a different sort of representation. Anyway, we can talk about Men another time. Let's get back to Sunshine. But yeah, Alex Garland also wrote this movie as well as directed the movie Men. Great director, great writer, but I think you're right, Matt. When they split apart, which I don't think they've worked together again since, but they are potentially working on another 28 something later.
28 years later.
I think it would probably have to be years at this point because the first, I think they want to bring back Cillian Murphy, and it's almost been 20 years since it's been over 20 years since the first one came out, so they could just bring him back.
I'm sure they'll represent that by just giving him a gray beard.
I mean, 20 years is pretty close to 28 years. They're not going to have to do that much work on it.
What about 28 months?
Well, it's been too long for 28 months later because that's only like 2 years, right?
You just need to use TV magic.
True.
Anyway, I think they're going with years, Kaylin.
It hasn't been 28 years.
But it's been way more than 28 months. Anyway, let's feel free to jump in at any point, Matt. There's no cue to
this is the body of the show, and we have our little bits. I have a recurring bit called the Home Alone of it all, which is basically when in the movie Home Alone, the movie kind of picks up when Kevin runs back to his house and starts putting the traps in the house. And
this is my home, and I will defend it.
I've determined that a lot
he rolls out the map.
Exactly.
Yeah,
when he rolls
like,
that map out,
X.
that's when the Home Alone of it all begins. And I've kind of found that in a lot of movies. Like a lot of movies do have that. Like this is what we came to see. This is what we want to see out of the movie. Basically, like the thing in the trailer, it starts here. This movie, I gotta say, has about 3. I don't know. We're gonna have to discuss it.
It's because it has 3 because there are 3 very distinct issues that they're dealing with on the ship, right? So each one of those issues has its own sort of Home Alone moment.
And it felt like each act was a different movie, almost in a lot of ways. Kind of like how Parasite is like 2 movies, if you break it down. This felt like it's like almost 3 separate movies, like a basic sci-fi, and then like a Us Against the Elements, and then a fucking Friday the 13th.
Well, Alex Garland's super impressive as a person. But also his mother is a psychologist, and his father was a political cartoonist. So I guess that's why he gets all his crazy, interesting ideas from psychology and cartooning
and political cartoons. That's like Annihilation is that the melding of those two things, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wanted to talk. There's a lot of psychology elements in this movie, which I can talk about later.
Oh, nice. Do it now.
Well,
Nice.
let me just quickly set up the sort of like the idea of the movie for the listener who's not familiar. Essentially, in the future, like the not too distant future, I guess, the sun has begun to die, and humanity essentially spends all of its resources to make a ship, which they send, and it gets lost. So they spend the remaining resources of the planet to the point that they are incapable of making a ship after the Icarus, which is the ship they're on. And they send
Icarus 2.
The Icarus 2. The first one was the Icarus. This is the Icarus 2. And we are following along with the crew of Icarus 2. And they basically have this enormous sun shield to protect their ship as it gets closer and closer to the sun. But their main purpose is to dump a massive a massive nuclear bomb into the sun to try and reactivate it. Which, when I describe that to anyone, I always feel like their eyes are rolling behind their face, like, oh, that's interesting. And they're like, nah, it sounds like the core or something, you know? Like,
throughout my life,
the center of the earth has stopped spinning. Like, what? Stupid.
I've made the joke a lot of my life, oh, nuke the sun. Like, and I think that I might have gotten that from the way that they presented the movie when it first came out.
What's the thing is, it doesn't sound fun or interesting or smart. It sounds stupid, like it's going to be a stupid movie like The Core.
Yeah,
but it's not that, because they're not focused on that really at all. It's all about, like Matt was saying, the psychology of the people who are isolated on this ship over the course of however many months or years it takes them to get to the sun.
Before we move forward with that, I just want to talk about this cast for 1 second. I'm gonna run down who's in this: Cillian Murphy, Rose Byrne, Chris Evans, Michelle Yeoh, Hiroyuki Sanada, who's been in like a million TV shows
and movies,
and Benedict Wong, who is he's notably in the MCU, and then Mark Strong, who I think is the horror guy.
He's Pinbacker. He's the guy who you never really fully see his face ever, so he's almost just like a voice actor.
And then Cliff Curtis, who plays Searle, the psychologist. You might recognize him from the little TV show called Fear the Walking Dead, which nobody's watched. But that's where I'm going. Where do I know this fucking dude from? But he's also been in a bunch of other stuff. This all-star cast into that. Michelle Yeoh was probably the most known at the time, but this cast would literally 1 year later, most of them would go on to like superstardom. So
almost every single one of them except for Troy Garrity, who I think he's in other stuff, but I'm like, I don't know if I've ever seen this man before or since this movie.
He's the guy. He's the number 2 guy, right? He's the guy who's
he's the communications officer who becomes the captain after the captain gets burned by the sun. Burned alive.
Looks like he's like a TV person. He's in a lot of TV.
He's known for the TV show Ballers.
Yes, I just noticed that. Cool.
Never heard of it.
I've never seen
Dwayne The Rock Johnson's show that's basically Entourage, but it's The Rock instead.
Sounds like something I would not be interested in.
My wife
watching.
loved it.
Right.
I love Mark Strong's character's name, Pinbacker.
Pinbacker, yeah.
It goes by so fast, but it's Cillian, whatever Murphy. It's like, when he finds out it's him, it's like, it's Pinbacker. You're like, are we scared of this guy? Pinbacker?
I mean, it's a kind of an intimidating name, and Mark Strong
he's gonna look like
a scariest voices.
Paperboy or something. Oh, Pinbacker.
I did a Google search before the episode, and Google said that it's pronounced Cillian. Whether Google's right or not, I don't know, but I was.
No, it is. It's pronounced Cillian.
I've always read it and heard it as Cillian.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But I've also heard people call him Cillian before, but his name is Cillian because I've heard him say his own name.
I'm a peaky blinder.
I'm a peaky
blinder, and I'm Cillian Murphy. Also, I've been in Batman Part 1.
I was a Batman.
Batman.
He was in all three of them.
He was in all three of them, yeah.
He's in the Oh yeah, when they show up with the fucking
At the beginning.
What's the difference between me and you? I'm not wearing hockey pants.
Yeah. Hockey pants. And then he's like the judge of Crazy Town or whatever.
There's a rumor that was supposed to be the Joker, but I think that would have been too small of a part.
I also think that's a stupid rumor because if Heath Ledger didn't die, they would have just made the Joker the main.
The
villain
Joker
of
would
the
have just
third movie.
also it would have been Joker and Bane high fiving for the whole movie. The movie would have been good and not.
I don't think Bane would have even existed if Heath Ledger was still around.
He just becomes Super Joker from fucking the Arkham games.
Yeah, like Super Shredder.
Yeah.
but funnier.
But funnier. But like less funny too, because he's like constantly killing people.
Yeah.
Do you guys like to pick your peeling skin as well?
Yep.
I do, yeah. When I have a bad sunburn, I get a large amount of joy out of getting a really big piece. A huge one. Yeah.
Did he get that?
I get that it's gross, but
did he have
really
sunburns
satisfying.
on his face from just like always being like?
I think he was a burn victim. My guess.
Wait, who are you talking about?
The psychologist dude.
It's because he's spending too much time in the sunroom. That's why he's getting sunburned.
Like
really?
Sunburned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because remember he's like slowly turning up the amount of sunlight that he can see, and the computer is like, you can view it at 0.004% opacity or some shit.
He's like, what about 3%?
3.1.
She's like, that will kill you. He's
like, you cannot. You will be
3%.
Permanently blinded. Yeah.
They're just wearing aviators looking at the sun from like 46 million.
It's a really, really cool set piece though, man.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to look at, and it's just a really interesting concept to have somebody be obsessed with staring at the sun because they're basically barreling towards it to potentially save humanity, but also maybe die. And I don't know. The concept is interesting in the fact that he's slowly going crazy, and you can tell throughout the movie, the therapist, but then you eventually do run into Pinbacker, who's gone full cuckoo bananas because of also doing the same thing. I would assume he probably spent a lot of time just staring at the sun.
My theory about Pinbacker is just a little Jason's theory corner. Is that when the whole ship killed themselves in the Icarus one? I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. He didn't die. Like he got burnt, but still had enough things to like keep him alive. But then there's a little bit of like paranormal stuff happening because like how does he have just a full body open wound? But that's why maybe they killed themselves very recently by opening the sun and fucking nuking themselves. That's my theory about Pinbacker and why he's able to be a burnt man. But
I also am like
killed them.
Yeah. Also, it's not clear. It's not clear. It's up to your own interpretation. But I agree with Kaylin. I think that he killed them and then positioned them in the room to look like they were, like angels or whatever.
Yeah, because he sabotaged the ship because they went in to check, and Captain America was like, "We can't use it. It's been sabotaged."
Mm-hmm.
The old Hot Ones host.
That's Sean Evans.
Damn it.
But I mean, they are going to do a hot one, the sun, the hottest one of all. So the movie kicks off with the Icarus going towards the sun, obviously, but we're immediately introduced to the bulk of the characters at once. But we also are kind of thrown into the first example of sort of psychological breakdown, which is Cillian Murphy, or I just call him Cillian. Cillian Murphy and Chris Evans' characters, Kappa and Mace, they're having a fist fight or a wrestling match,
perfect.
A headlock competition.
Kappa and Mace are back on the case. It writes itself.
Yeah. And they get separated. The psychologist tries to cool them down.
Why were they fighting? Even on second viewing,
testosterone.
It's just
they were the two hot guys.
Cabin fever, man. They're around the same people for months and months and months. They
were told they only have a certain amount of time before they lose comms, so you have to like deliver their final messages home. And then Cillian Murphy took too long with his message, and then Mace couldn't send his.
There we go. Matt was paying attention.
I watched it today.
Yeah. But yeah, okay. So that's actually good because I didn't write or I don't know where my notes are, but yeah. So I that also compiled with the the idea that they're going crazy. They're losing their minds. You remember COVID? Remember what that was like? Imagine COVID, except you can't leave at all, not even with a mask on. And then we go through we meet the characters one by one. You start to realize that they all have sort of their positions amongst the crew, as well as their own sort of ways of dealing with the stress. And Michelle Yeoh tends to the garden and seems to spend most of the time in the oxygen, and like I assume that garden is for both food and to provide oxygen to the ship. Then we've got the communications officer, who's kind of got his head up his own butt. Even from the beginning, he just seems like a bit of a dildo, just a guy who takes his job very, very seriously. And it's like, yeah, we get it. We're on the most important mission mankind has ever gone on. We're taking it seriously. And then Mace, Chris Evans' character, is essentially the engineer, the one who is in charge of making sure that the engines are constantly running. And then you gotta get
and are cool enough.
Yes, they stay cold.
There's a lot about coolant. Him and coolant. He's a cool guy, and
he gets frozen a lot in this movie.
Well, I mean, that's a nice bit of foreshadowing at the beginning when he drops the wrench into the coolant and then grabs his hand in, and so you realize like, oh, that's like extra cold.
Yeah, but then he like fully swims in it twice. So like, how cold is it really?
Cold enough to kill him.
Yeah. Well, he gets stuck. But when he goes back in, anyway, that's later. Sorry.
He also got his whole arm frozen while being in space.
In deep space, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy too. But yeah, we're walking through the ship, meeting everybody, and
what about the alien homage where we kind of see them all grouped around the table?
Yeah, the best movie, the best thing in any spaceship movie is when they all sit around a table eating or having a mundane conversation.
You get to see all their gimmicks, basically. You get to see what they're all like, what their thing is.
And we like Matt said, the message is sent. We get to see Cillian Murphy's message to his sister, I believe, and it kind of explains the entire setup of the movie through that one recording. Which the movie bookends with the same recording at the end, where we get to see frozen Australia, which is kind of interesting, but at the same time, you're like, okay, I get it. You didn't need to show me the Sydney Opera House frozen. Like, I get that it's cold on Earth.
They only had the budget.
Yeah, but they needed to show you a place that isn't normally cold.
Yeah, that's true.
And some sort of landmark to make you realize it's the place.
Right.
That's a good point, actually. Like, I did kind of chuckle at that moment at the end, but then I was like, there's not a lot of places where you could just like show a thing and be like, oh, I get it. They're in a place that's normally hot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason they chose the Sydney Opera House. Yeah, the pyramids.
Pyramids, yeah, or
that'd be a good one.
I think the
reason Chinese theater with snow all around it.
They chose the Sydney Opera Hall because Australia is one of the hottest places on Earth, and the Sydney Opera Hall is one of the most recognizable buildings on Earth. So it's like, if they show the Statue of Liberty, we already know that New York gets a lot of fucking snow every year. But yeah, the communications officer picks up an odd sound. We don't know what it is as the audience, but it's this really interesting sort of. It almost sounds like a whale call, but more sort of robotic. It's like pew! Not a great impression, but it's cool sounding. It's very science fictiony and spooky. I would have to listen to it to be able to do an appropriate.
I am a robot whale.
I'll try it. I think it was more like.
I'm Robert De Niro.
What the distress call sounds like? That is pretty distressing.
You gotta meet me.
It goes. And then it also has this weird sort of like layered over it, so it sounds like Darth Vader breathing. But yeah, we hear this sound. It's really ominous sounding, and then the communication officer explains to the team that it's the distress call from the Icarus One, and other than that, they're not getting any other communications from the ship. And the theory is that the radiation from the sun is so intense from where the ship is that they weren't able to receive that distress call from Earth because of the radiation of the sun. And then this is sort of like the the moment where the movie, I would say the Home Alone of it all begins for the first time.
The first
where,
Home Alone of it all.
Yeah, they have to make the decision whether or not they should alter their course slightly in order to answer the distress call,
there was
or
one little
continue
note
along their
I wanted
course.
to mention about that, because Mercury is made of like a metal. It's amplifying the signal, so I thought that was an interesting little
Satellite.
Right,
sciencey moment, because like if they were on like some other planet that didn't have that amplification, they would have just flown right by it, and then there would be no movie. They'd unload the payload and then they'd fly back home to Earth, and nobody would get trapped in a space-time continuum loop or whatever the fuck happens at the end. Kalen, what's up, buddy?
Did you guys notice at the beginning the Fox Searchlight branding is in reverse of how it normally starts a movie?
I didn't, but say more.
Deep cut.
I don't really know if there's a significance to it, because like I didn't really
remember
notice the kind of forward reversal of the movie. But normally with the Fox logo, like you start in the city or something, and then you slowly come over to Fox, and then pan out a little bit. This one, it starts out, moves in, and then pans over to the city or some shit like that.
That's interesting. I like that. But I remember it stopped, and then that's when we get like the voiceover of like, the sun is the hottest place in the
Sunshine.
galaxy.
Also, no movie
It's
title
just radiation.
that I heard.
There was some adjacent ones. There was like they say the sun and stuff.
Yeah, I'll give an honorable mention to that.
Cool. I didn't put a time stamp down for that, but
Yeah, I remember when I was watching the special features for this years and years ago that Brian Cox, the physicist and astrologist, was like a consultant on the movie. So a lot of the sciencey stuff, though not completely scientifically accurate, was like consulted by one of like the top leading professionals and handsome man, I must say, that Brian Cox.
He looks like Cillian Murphy kind of.
He does look like Cillian Murphy. I think that was a conscious choice by Danny Boyle to sort of have Cillian emulate Brian Cox in appearance.
Welcome back to Jason's Theory Corner. The more hair that Cillian Murphy has, the more handsome he is, and the less hair he has, the more menacing he looks.
Yeah.
You know what? I think I agree with that.
Listen,
what about at the beginning of 28 Days Later, where he has long hair but half of his head is shaved?
Oh shit!
Because he has a head wound.
Yeah, well, that's a sort of zombie movie. So like, you know,
he's a beard.
And you
he's
see his
naked.
dong.
And I also say the opposite.
Very British of them.
Chris Evans.
Yeah, I don't like Chris Evans with his long hair. I like him when he has like,
I
his
could
nice
not
short hair.
fucking recognize. I was like, who the fuck? It looks like Chris Evans,
Which
but it
is
must
weird
be
because
some
he
lesser
basically
known-
is. He's sporting the look from Captain America 2 or whatever when he's got the long hair.
But that was.
I think that's his natural hair, though, and at least.
This was clearly.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, like a wig and a
this
fake
was
beard.
clearly
Yeah.
bad wig and fake beard. Like
They didn't really show him up close a lot. They're like, yeah, well, you can't. Don't focus too much on the beard, guys. You can see the glue.
but the second he had that like iconic shaved head look that he has in like every movie, I was like, oh fuck, I'm an idiot. Apparently, the color grading of this movie is kind of weird. Like it's kind of like a deep yellow and black, so it's hard to make out people's faces a lot of times.
I do like a lot of the color grading in this movie, though. How there's so many hard differences between things.
Yeah.
Like the sunroom compared to the engine room,
compared
to the garden and stuff.
The
It's
garden
like
room. The garden
very
room
strong color
pops.
palettes. Yeah.
When they go to the Icarus one and it's all grown in, I thought that was really fucking real
That was cool.
visual.
Yeah, like the
And
red jungle.
You get that you get that small bit of hope. You're like, they did it. They have got infinite oxygen now and infinite food, and they're gonna make it. And then everything just goes to shit.
And then they
5 minutes
find
later.
the devil. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they find literally Satan.
So at this point in the movie, when they have to make this decision to either alter their course to intercept the distress beacon of the Icarus 1 or continue on their course to the sun, they're basically looking to the captain, Captain Kaneda, I think his name is. Kaneda.
Yeah.
And he basically says, I don't think I can make this decision. I think that I have to have our nuclear physicist be the one to make the choice. Is it worth having 2 bombs, or is it worth us to just go? And they're like, we don't even know if the bomb is going to work. So if we have 2 bombs, it's a lot better than having the one. So they make the decision to alter the course. which, is fine, but Benedict Wong fucks up. Trey fucks up so hard. And I feel so bad for him, but at the same time, it's such a fuck up.
I wouldn't say it was so hard. Like,
yeah, it fucked up. He fucked up. Man.
He fucked up bad because
I feel like
he says it repeatedly.
Yeah. When they come into the room and he's losing his mind and he's like, there were so many things and then they're like, it was like the
he
first
had tunnel
thing.
vision. He was focusing on one thing, the trajectory.
But they're like, it was like the first thing you should have known was not to turn the fucking ship. And then he's like, oh, I was like, this guy's going to be an issue. I'm still unclear whether or not he actually decoupled the two ships or if it was the spooky monster.
Yeah.
Is that open for interpretation? Do you?
Are you talking about Benedict Wong did it?
Yeah.
Because I assumed that Monster Man did it.
But before I knew about Monster Man, I just had assumed he heard them talking on the comms. He knew generally what had to happen. 3 people had to die. He saw an opportunity. 3 people were off the ship. If he took his own life after that makes 4. They can complete the mission. So he did it and then click-clacked himself.
He also would have been killing the one person who knows how to do the bomb.
That's a good point. See, that's after Pinbacker's revealed. That's when I was like, oh, did Pinbacker do this? And it just so happened that Benedict Wong's character was like, oh, I fucked up so bad that I have to.
Yeah. So the fuck up, to be clear, is that he made all of the changes on the trajectory of the ship, but he forgot to reorientate the shields on the front of the ship. So
but to do that, he had to like override something, and therefore he thought the ship would do the shields on it automatically, but since he did the override, it overrided that as well.
Yeah, so
it was a common mistake.
A common mistake that potentially could have cost the entire ship their lives.
You know when you're
fucked
like
up into all of humanity.
You know when you're a few 100,000 feet from the sun and you make a colossal fuck up like that, it's pretty common.
But also in his defense, they should have been checking on him to make sure that he was doing everything correctly. Have people double, triple check the work for him as well in order to avoid a fuck up like that. But they all forgive him essentially, but he is incapable of forgiving himself for the entirety of the movie to the point that he kills himself. Yeah.
Well, they put him on suicide watch and then they have to.
I feel that's still potentially open to interpretation, sort of. I'm not like, I'm kind of on the fence. First, I was like, no, he didn't. But then I was like, maybe he didn't.
Yeah. I think there is a case to be said that Pinbacker killed him and then staged it to look like a suicide.
Yeah.
But he's in the cube of beauty or whatever the fuck that thing is, like the holodeck.
Pinbacker could have like let him free and gave him the knife and all that.
Yep. Oh, that actually maybe that's it. Because I was like, how did he get out of the sedation or whatever?
But then, how would Pinbacker know that he was all sedated for that reason?
That's true,
and wanted to kill himself.
Maybe they had one of those clipboards at the hospital that they put on your bed that say, like,
a clipboard.
Suffering from suicidal tendencies. Yeah. Interesting. Also, what accent is Mark Strong doing? Is it like South African or something? It's like a weird accent.
I thought he was doing. He's doing like a weird Tommy Wiseau.
So he's doing a Dracula accent. Yeah. He's from Transylvania.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
He's Dracula.
He's Dracula. So yeah, the shields, because they do eventually reorientate themselves, but a bunch of them get stuck because they are being fried or whatever. I'm not exactly sure why they get stuck, but they have to send 2 people out in order to manually reorientate the shields to stop the ship from being in any danger. But in doing so,
the most pimped out spacesuits I've ever seen.
I really like the design.
Are cool.
I really like the design of those spacesuits. They're so fucking unsettling for some reason. They really unsettled me.
They're like deep sea diving suits made of pure gold, which is
they kind of like they kind of look and walk like those aliens from
Fifth Element.
Fifth Element?
No, Stargate. I think it's Stargate.
Oh yeah.
Stargate.
They kind of like walk in as like the key. They like put the key in that like pyramid. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's the Fifth Element.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of the Fifth Element.
Oh, it's the Fifth Element. It is. Why am
Yeah.
I thinking of Stargate?
We did
I
start.
don't know. They're both space movies.
recently.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Oh, because they take place in like Egypt or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, Fifth Element. Yeah, those guys.
Oh, just a side note to go back to the accent. The person I was trying to conjure was Peter Stormare. His accent, I kept thinking that it was actually him. Peter Stormare he's in Jurassic Park: The Lost World. He gets eaten by the like little dudes.
Oh right, yeah.
And he's also the psychiatrist in the game Until Dawn, and he's been in fucking a million things.
He's a lot of guys and a lot of things. Yeah, he's like a regular in the Coen Brothers movies.
Right. Yes. He's in Fargo. Yeah, he's the fucking guy in Fargo.
He feeds Steve Buscemi into a wood chipper.
Wood chipper, which is the greatest fucking shit. I love that movie. Sorry.
Spoiler alert.
Good movie.
Good movie.
So this part I don't understand because Kappa is the most important character on the ship, and Chris Evans nominates him to go out to fix the shields.
Chris Evans is the most rational character.
And that's like the most irrational
because
decision.
He makes he's like, well, if you're gonna make the decision to fucking steer us on a wild goose chase, well, you're gonna go out and you're gonna.
Yeah, but that seems like the irrational thing because he's more valuable, right?
True.
Yeah.
So then he later says like Kappa needs to go in the suit because he's more valuable.
I think it was a moment of fuck you, man, and maybe he didn't think that Kappa would say yeah. He probably thought Kappa would be like, no, I'm not doing it. Or maybe he thought there was no danger. I don't know, but it seems like there's a lot of danger. In my opinion, that
going
is a
into
very
space.
dangerous thing.
Yeah.
I think going out of the safe spaceship
risk
on a spacewalk. You go on the front of the ship where the sun will instantly turn you to dust if you get caught in its beams.
And the back of the spaceship, it will instantly turn you to ice, and you will shatter and explode.
Yeah.
Wild. And then we have a cool shot of the rotating bits of the ship, and I think it's the communications go first. They get hit by the sun's radiation and just basically gets turned to dust, and then the oxygen lab, the greenhouse, I guess, gets lit aflame as well. Which was
a really cool shot. The sun burning through.
It was really cool. And then it was also really cool when Michelle Yeoh goes to try and put the fire out, and she's in this little tiny box of a hallway that's made entirely of windows, and then she's just surrounded by fire. And it's a really beautiful shot, but it's also kind of, again, like another bit of foreshadowing. It's like, these people are going to be burned alive at some point. And then we've got the captain and Kappa go out on the spacewalk, and they repair a couple of the panels, saving the ship, but they know that they don't have enough time to fix the last one. So Kanata basically tells Kappa to go back.
I made a note right around this point of the movie that was, maybe don't call your ship going to the sun Icarus.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you know your Greek mythology, Icarus flew so close to the sun that his wax wings melted, and then he fell into the fucking ocean and died.
I like Stanley Kubrick's take on that fable or whatever. It's not a matter of don't fly too close to the sun. It's a matter of build better wings.
I mean, they didn't have a lot to work with, Icarus and his dad.
They had their wax and they had their feather.
Yeah, they had like a bunch of wax and a bunch of feathers from like a bird's nest that they found. But I think also the story is like, you can't fly too close to the sun or the wings will melt. But if you get too close to the ocean, the salt water will also cause the wings to become heavy and suck you down as well. So you have to like stay perfectly on course.
Yeah, it's like Flappy Bird. So that Flappy Bird was invented when that one developer saw the classic fable. Flappy Bird.
Yes. That was the original title of Icarus, the story of Icarus. It was called Flappy Bird. Yes, so we have the tragedy occur, which is Kanata sends Kappa back, and he realizes that there's not enough time for him to get back before he is in the sun's light. And so rather than try to go back, he decides that he's going to just face the sun, and he like floats up slowly. And this is when the music kicks in, and it's like the music I think they used in the trailer and everything. And like the song now has been used in so many trailers of this specific song.
I learned that the song from this movie, it's one of those like pop culture moments where the song from this movie is used in like memes and stuff to evoke a certain feeling, because you're assuming that you've seen this movie and like know how the, you know, like the song from that Jared Leto movie, the drug one,
Requiem.
Yeah, Requiem. You know, you hear that and it evokes a certain thing. People use it in memes and stuff. And I realized that the main overture from this song is like used in memes and stuff, and has been used in pop culture.
It's been used in trailers since this movie came out.
Yeah.
So it's probably people using it as from the meme because they saw it in a trailer and not necessarily this movie.
Not necessarily
this movie did not do well.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people saw this movie.
Hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see this one?
But yeah, and all the while the doctor is screaming over the radio at the captain, like, what does it look like? What do you see? Tell me what it looks like. I want to know what you see.
I don't care if you're dying.
Yeah. Well, I at first I took that as the doctor trying to comfort him in his last moments before death, but it's also just another piece of evidence that the doctor is losing his marbles and is more obsessed with what it means to stare at the sun and what would happen if you stared at the sun at its full force before dying. So it's cool, it's interesting, but it's also just another thing to like have you understand why Pinbacker has gone so cuckoo by the end. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
What's the point of the little visor in the helmet if you can't look at the sun at all?
It's why like, not I think it's the same idea.
Oh, I'll answer that. It's so that you can see. So you can fucking see.
No, but why not just have a big ass?
No, it's because you know how like when you make a thing to look at the eclipse, you have to have like a small slit and then like
but
the
they
picture's
can't look
reversed.
at the sun at all.
I think that there's more going on than it's just a slit. I think
it's like when you see those like goggles you wear when you're in the Arctic because the sun reflects off of the snow so much that it can blind you, so it reduces the amount of light that's going in, right? Like, it's to cut the light.
Indigenous and Inuit, you see those pictures at the ROM of old school, their version of sunglasses had that.
But what light though? They're not when they're in the sun, they die. So like that can't be it. Like what light are they reducing?
Good point. But they had to put
listen, it looks cool, okay?
Yeah, they could have just been in like just glass suits.
Yeah.
Because they were never in the sun.
That's my nitpick.
Yeah, I mean, but then you don't have the cool visual, right?
Then you don't have that like, cool
it did look cool.
Costume.
Well, maybe they designed the suits not realizing how powerful the sun was. They're like, this suit will protect you.
Or maybe if they were further away from where they were, they would be able to go out in full sunlight in those suits. But because they're so close at this point, you can't. I forgot to talk.
These suits I'm just going to say these suits do a lot of heavy lifting in this movie, I will say, to Kalen's point. There's a lot of like, it's kind of a cure-all for a lot of moments of like, just put the fucking suit on, you'll be fine. Sucked into space, put the suit on.
Well, again, I'm telling you, Brian Cox was on set every day. He probably had a say in these decisions as well. So there's probably something going on that we just would have to look into it a little bit more. But I'm not a sun doctor.
Do your own research.
I don't know. Or we could just sit here and shit on it. I don't know. What the fuck?
The sun is flat, okay?
The sun is flat, guys.
It's proven in this movie that the sun is flat.
The sun is projected into the sky by the government.
Yeah, in the firmament.
and they're trying to turn all the friggin' frogs gay.
No, the frogs are already gay. That's the conceit here.
I thought they were asexual.
I forgot to mention the moment where the entire crew goes to the sunroom to look at Mercury as it passes over the sun, and it's a really cool shot. I just wanted to bring it up because it's probably my favorite shot of the entire movie.
I thought Mercury looked really cool. You don't
think it's just like a black marble passing over this. It gives you like a sense of scale in terms of like how far away they still are from the sun and how absolutely massive the sun actually is. It's crazy. It's crazy to think of. It's like unfathomably huge. And it will live for longer than we can ever comprehend in our minds. It's basically an old one. It's like Cthulhu. The sun is Cthulhu.
The sun is Cthulhu confirmed.
Yeah. um. Anyway, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that particular shot. I just think it's probably one of the most beautiful things.
I
in the
enjoy
movie.
like them actually showing Mercury. It resonated with me. I like when them explaining how it's made. I mentioned this earlier, but it's made of like a particular metal that is now causing them to get, the signal boosted of this Icarus that just had a distress signal going, I guess, for 6 years.
I personally like the opening shot where we see the ship and then like kind of first we think it's the sun, then we find out it's the ship, and then we get like go around it and then behind it, and then we see the sun, and it kind of forms like an eyeball, sort of like a
like a
what's
retina?
the middle part? Yeah,
An iris.
Iris. Yeah,
I did like the design of the ship was basically like a giant shield with the ship behind it, right?
Yeah, I think all the space stuff looks really fucking good, and I that's one thing that I was really surprised about, because like we were saying at the beginning, usually you go back to between the years of 2000 and 2009, CG is like, even the first Iron Man, you go back and you're like, ugh, he's real CGI looking, isn't he?
The old school Iron Man parts are a little bit like, ugh.
Yeah,
and the first time that you see like his like mask come down, like I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Compared to Guardians of the Galaxy 3, where like the CGI for those fucking animals is just out of control. I'm not going to say anything.
Top drawer.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I want to, because it looks fun.
It's very good.
Actually, it doesn't look fun. It looks like it's going to be real
horrible.
tragic.
Yeah, it's not a kid's movie. My just as an aside, this movie really shows that now they're trying to sort of cater to the kids that have grown up with the MCU now, and this one really, like, James Gunn knew who his target audience is, and I fully feel like kids who went to that were like a little bit too young got like the Dark Crystal treatment of like, this is for me, but this is not for me.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like the first Guardians movie came out almost 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
It's wild. Anyway, back to the
question.
sunshine. Yeah, go ahead.
Would an explosion in the sun have an adverse effect on Earth? Like, wouldn't that kind of cause like maybe a solar flare or something that would?
Well, I think that's the point. Is the sun is dying, and they're trying to create.
They're trying to like kickstart it.
I know that they're
sort of
trying to,
activation.
but like in theory, I get it. But I'm thinking again, nitpicking here. If that were to actually, like, if there was an explosion, wouldn't that be bad for us?
They probably did a little bit of science.
You know what's also bad for us? The sun
dying. Australia being under ice.
Yeah.
What
But, like,
year is this movie?
they seemed okay on the ice. They're playing. They weren't wearing like crazy amount of stuff.
Made a
Were they like, the sun's gonna die? We're all gonna die in 100 years, 1,000.
I think it was like 18 years or something. Was like what they predicted was how long they had left.
I liked that low light look. I liked, you know what I mean? It obviously was just to show how like bright it was going to get in a few minutes. But I liked how it looked when they showed her on her weird device.
Smoggy.
Yeah.
It kind of just looked like day for night to me when movies film.
Looked
day
like
for
dusk.
night.
Yeah, like an old
like
Western
shit.
where it's like it's supposed to be nighttime, but it's just a filter.
Yeah.
What year is it supposed to be in this movie? Like 2057 or something? Like not too far from our time?
I don't actually know if they give you
I'm not
a
sure
clear date. I think it's 2057.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did I get it right on the head?
You guessed the exact date. Yeah.
Someone was watching the movie.
I was going to say 2054, and then I was like, let's go a couple of years up.
Yeah, good guess. So yeah, the captain dies, and then the communications officer is now promoted to captain, and he starts giving shitty orders.
He's the worst.
The position goes to his head immediately, and everyone's like,
communications
"Listen, man."
officer also didn't have a job anymore because
because their communications got
his
destroyed.
communication tower got
their comms
destroyed.
towers were all busted.
Yeah.
Which is a great, like, when they're trying to figure out who gets the suit to go back from the Icarus, and he's like, I think everybody needs a captain, and they're just looking at him like, you're useless.
Yeah.
You're just ranting.
Yeah.
You're like a
Even the
fucking
psychiatrist
shitty
is
king.
like, all right, ignore this motherfucker.
Also, they were, again, not to nitpick, the person with the suit should have stayed there to blast them off and then go over on their own because they're in a suit.
Yeah,
I think they had limited
You get
time.
one chance. You get one chance at the blast because it was a
That's all they
depressurization thing.
Because the suit has the little
I think they had limited time. I don't think that they had like enough time to blast people over, and then but also like if you blast someone over there and they aren't, because they can't open their eyes or anything, they're gonna be blind. Like
they're literally holding their breath.
Yeah, true.
Because
when he floats off into space, he like finally exhales and he just
that whole part is very uncomfortable, but we'll get to that in a moment. After they come back in from the spacewalk to fix the shields, they do eventually then come across the Icarus One. And this is when the movie takes another tonal shift from being a "oh no, our ship doesn't work" movie to a haunted house,
to a haunted mansion.
Let's go into a ship and immediately disgust everybody by saying, "Yeah, all this dust, human skin."
Yeah, yeah. Dust is 30% human skin.
Yeah,
as a matter of fact.
Also, we get a little bit of a Tyler Durden homage kind of thing with the flash of
flashes.
The faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
which
shit
is like weird foreshadowing.
Like I was about to have a goddamn seizure when that was happening.
The first time they did it, I was like, "What does that mean?" And they show it like they should do it a couple more times, and then as soon as they showed the picture of the astronauts, I was like, "Oh,
yeah." It was leading up to the
I kept going, "Merry fucking Christmas" every time it would pop up.
I started fist fighting myself.
Oh my god. Yeah, so they send a team over, which is comprised of Chris Evans, Cillian, the psychiatrist, and the communications officer, right? It's those four of them.
Yeah.
And as you said before, they find the main reason they now have to go over here is because their ship is no longer capable of creating air. So they're like, we can't even not go there now. We have to go over there to take their ship. But they make the discovery that the engines have been destroyed. But the garden is overgrown to the point that they're like, yeah, we're good. But then they also go to the sunroom where they discover the crew, what happened to the crew. And again, we talked about this a bit earlier, but it's a little unclear as to their demise. But I still think the captain killed them and positioned them there like a happy family. I can't remember what happens. What happens at this point now? I can't remember.
They find everything, and then they realize that the thing was decoupled.
Right. Yeah, it's not operational, and
so they can't even get back, and the door's broken or whatever.
Yes,
and they can't even use the payload either. The payload is just there now.
Or the ship is busted. The ship was.
Couldn't they just push it though? Couldn't they use their thing to push that one?
I don't think so.
Again, I'm sorry for being.
Couldn't they just get a rope?
But...
Couldn't they just tie a rope around the old Icarus one?
Yeah,
and pull
get
it off
Theodore
into
the
space?
tugboat out there and give it a little tug.
I don't know if it's that easy, but maybe
in space.
Fine,
no
not a rope.
Or whatever.
We'll use a chain.
There's no friction.
I
don't know, man. I don't know. I have no idea. That thought did not even occur to me to just push the other ship with your ship.
Yeah, I was going through the emotion horrified during all of this, so I wasn't thinking about like how can they get out of this experience. That would be like a second viewing. I would probably, which I rarely do for movies.
Yeah, I don't find myself nitpicking a lot when I watch this movie because I find it very enjoyable in terms of like a character study, and the visuals are really interesting. So I'm not like sitting there being like, wait a minute.
For me,
is dust actually made of 30% human skin? That sounds like an over exaggeration.
I couldn't stop. Like a lot of times we watch movies and I'm like, ugh, I gotta get through this movie. This movie, I was like what's gonna happen next? As soon as I realized that it's one of those movies where like it's a twist after a twist after a twist, I just wanted to see what was gonna happen. It's just so interesting. The actors are all so good. Like the acting in this movie is fucking top notch.
Right.
You feel like you're there on the ship with them. It's got that it's kind of like what Sphere isn't in a lot of ways. Like Sphere was a pretty good movie, but it felt really pulpy and really like this is a science fiction movie. This felt like an indie flick, you know? It's more about the people, but also like the ships are like characters, and the sun is a character, and space is a character.
I think that's like one of the charms of Danny Boyle as a director is that he is capable of taking a movie like Sunshine that clearly is a hard science fiction and making it feel more like an indie
Like Danny Boyle's sphere would be amazing. You know?
Maybe. Who knows?
Fear was fine.
Sphere is fine.
I
And
like
Event
Sphere,
Horizon.
I just
read that they lived together during filming to kind of get that camaraderie.
For this
Yeah.
or for Sphere?
For this.
I could see that. They all had that.
They do that a lot with
Alien.
movies like this, right? Like
Yeah.
Alien. They didn't live together, but they got them to like customize their own bunks and stuff, and like just to make everything feel a little bit more lived in. And
Well, Alien, they were
real.
experiencing everything at the same time for the first time a lot of the time.
Yeah, they wouldn't tell people what was going to happen, and they would just cover them in blood a second later.
Mhm.
What
I
the
think-
fuck?
I think the Thing had that too, where John Carpenter would just do things to the people to make them all on edge to help the performance. And I feel like this movie feels more like The Thing than Sphere did, but it also feels more like Event Horizon, which is that next week?
Yeah,
Because if I'm getting
Don't say
this-
too much about Event Horizon.
I'm not going to, but like we're full. You position these three movies in such a way that we're descending into space hell, like from the most not space hell to the most space hell. This fits right in the middle of
What was the first one?
Sphere.
but Sphere is underwater. But I mean, underwater feels just as alien as like space. does,
Yeah,
you know, it's
yeah. I guess
essentially. the
I love
same
that
thing.
movie.
it was good.
I want to highlight a few things. Can I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Have you done your plot?
you're the guests.
I mean, we still got a bit more, but yeah, you can
All right, plot it up.
Well, I mean, we're just kind of going through the movie, so if you have some stuff you want to say, then go
Oh,
for
we
it.
skipped over it. Well, back to the whole light bathing thing. I
Right.
thought was really cool, which I didn't notice until I watched it over again. So the guy, the psychologist, is like, he's right at the start of the movie, is explaining to someone about it. And it's kind of like offhand, and they even clip to other people, but you still hear him talking in the background. But he's like, they make the or the person he's talking to makes the analogy. It's like, oh, it must be like a sensory deprivation tank.
Right.
And he's like, no, it is the opposite of that. It's like sensory deprivation tank. Like you don't feel anything, you don't see anything. It's like you don't hear anything, but like this, he's like, it envelops you. So it's like the opposite of the sensory deprivation tank. And in a world where it's like they're all isolated, like it makes sense that the other guy goes crazy religious, because it's like that sense of belonging and like welcomingness that like religion might give you, that it's like this big warm hug. It's all the feelings all at once. So when he recommends it as like, I suggest you try it out, I think it's like the best medicine. And that's probably why he's like kind of pushing for it. Be like, this is what we should be doing. This
Yeah.
is the meaning of life, kind of thing.
He's like, as your psychiatrist, I'm writing you a prescription for 25 minutes a day in the light overload
In the
room,
light.
the sensory overload chamber.
And that's sort of like that plays into the metaphor or the belief of ancient times that the sun was literally God. You know, what's that ball in the sky that makes it light in the day and dark at night? You know.
Yeah,
For sure.
definitely. So we're almost there though too in terms of plot. Basically, the
They
ship is
saved
useless
the
to them.
world.
Yeah, the ship is useless to them, and then suddenly the two ships explosively decouple from each other, and the Icarus's airlock is destroyed, and they have to shoot each other over. And again, we say they put the Kappa in the suit because he's the most important, and the rest of the doctor has to stay behind because one person has to stay behind to launch them out the airlock, which is basically a death sentence for him. And the other two, Chris Evans and the communications officer, are also blasted across, but because there's only one suit, it's super dangerous.
Welcome back to Jason's Theory Corner.
Oh God!
I have a new theory about why the character Kappa is named Kappa. Now, it is spelt C-A-P-A. However, a Kappa in Japanese lore is a turtle. And turtles are seen as wise, right? So my theory is that he's named Kappa because he's constantly in this shell of the suit, but he's the wise man on the ship. I'm not gonna say any more. I'm just gonna let you guys sort of breathe that in. And
I sorry. Jason wants us all to be like, wow, my mind is blown that you just said that.
that's everything I say. That's what I want people to take in.
Yeah, it's called being a narcissist.
Hey, I get it from my mom. Okay.
Also, 2001: Space Odyssey homage.
This whole movie is a 2001: A Space Odyssey homage. But yeah, there's
that scene specifically, like
for sure. Yeah, definitely. But even like a lot of the shots of the suit really remind me of 2001. But also exactly what happens in 2001 is, two of them get in and then one of them flies off into the coldness of space and turns to ice and then shatters when his arm shatters. Oof. Creepy.
This is a pivotal moment for that communications officer before he dies. The shattered arm. The one actor who's never in anything else after this movie.
Yeah, his arm shattering was a representative of his career shattering.
But from like a psychology standpoint, all the characters have like very tightly tied identities to like their job on the ship. And they all slowly lose that job. They all slowly lose that purpose. He loses his purpose first. Like the comms tower gets blown up. And so then he feels, and you kind of see it on his face too when it happens. And they're just like, well, you're useless now. Like when they kind of fight about it, like, well, we're not going to have it for the way back. And it's like,
we're not coming
whatever.
back.
Rose Byrne's like, we'll deal with that later.
Yeah.
And he's just like, huh? But then when he's now like, he's the second in command captain, he's now wearing this like new hat, but it's like not a hat he's comfortable with. So like identity theories would say when you have a new identity that you're not fully confident in, you really push it on people. So that's him in that moment being like, no, I'm the captain. He's like, I'm important. And they're like, no, you're not.
You're definitely the least important person in this room now.
But people need
a
captain.
That's a very like strong self-identity point. It's like, when you really hold a self-identity strongly, you don't need to show it to people. You don't need to be constantly being like, hey, I do this thing. I'm this person. It's like, it's so innate in you that you don't feel the need to do that. But when it's like a weakly held identity, but you really want it, you push it onto people. So you're like, hey, I support this hockey team, so I wear the jersey or whatever. So the example I use sometime is, you don't see like players on the Maple Leafs walking downtown Toronto wearing their Maple Leafs jerseys. They don't need to do that. Like they are tightly tied to that.
That would be a douchebag.
Yeah, but it's like so sometimes it's called role theory. So it's like when you have a strong role and you're comfortable in that role, you don't need to portray it outwards. But when you want other people to know you play that role, you push it onto people, and that's what that guy's doing right there. It's like,
I like these psychology breakdowns. Come back for more.
Well, Matt
all of them almost.
Matt basically works in the field of psychology, so he knows a lot about it.
That's really man. I was captivated by that actually.
I'll go down all of them
because the thing that resonates with me about that is like there's a person that works in my office. The night of the first big playoff game, she came in decked out to the nines with Maple Leaf stuff on it. I actually thought to myself like, do you think Tavares like fucking wore his jersey all day? Probably not. He probably just like focused on the task at hand, like anybody does their job. But then the fanatics are all like, we gotta help the team win by wearing their merchandise.
No, that's the thing. It's not the fanatics. So the real fanatic, a real like hockey fan, they're the sad person in their basement, just like crying, watching the TV. But like the people that do that, like wear all the gear, they're the bandwagon jumpers. Sure, they're like. So when you think about portraying your identity outwards and how much you hold it, so it's like, say you have a graph. So like this is how much you portray that identity outwards. This is like how much you actually hold it. It'll be like a inverted U. So it's like if you don't hold the identity at all, you're not going to portray that identity. So if you don't give a crap about hockey, whatever, you're never going to wear a hockey jersey. So that's like low.
So that's.
But then when you're kind of in the middle, you want to really portray it because you want other people to know. So you're still a fan or whatever. You have that as an identity, but you're not going to. So you want to portray it outwards. You want other people to know that you have that identity. But then when you're so strongly have that identity, so like further on that curve, you don't need to portray it anymore. So that's the kind of idea. Anyways.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
You've opened my eyes to so many personal mannerisms.
I'm all fucked up.
Caleb's going to burn all his Blue Jay hats tonight.
No, it's actually the opposite. There's a lot of things that I don't bother with projecting or whatever because I already know it to be true for me, so I don't really give a fuck about others or whatever.
Right.
But that's cool to kind of hear it in a more professional way.
Yeah. But I see it in myself, like when I get like a new hobby or something, it's like all I want to talk about to people.
Yeah.
Sure, it's like partially like interest, but it's like, hey, I'm into this new thing now. And yeah.
That's
so
cool.
It's like it's me trying to say, like, here's my new hat I have.
Yeah. I'm the captain now.
That's weird because like I personally I don't want to turn this into a therapy session, but like I don't I'm like the opposite even of that, where I like to keep things close to my chest until I'm sure about whether or not I feel like I have this new job that I'm in right now, and I've sort of got this office that I'm in charge of, but I'm the IT guy, but also it's a bit broader than that, but I'm not talking about it as much. Like people are asking, you know, Madison's parents are asking me about it, my parents are asking me about the job, and I don't want to give them too much about it because I'm not sure where it's all going to shake out. So like I would have if I was thrust into the communication officer situation, I don't think that I would react like everybody has to bow to me. I think I would be more I think I'd be more like I'd go with the flow and not try to call shots immediately, and I would listen to the smarter people, like the engineer and
that'd be like a good captain. Like, so he's wearing that role, but he's not confident like internally, so he's like almost like a fake it till you make it kind of probably mentality.
I think there's also the fact that he is terrified to die.
He's terrified to die, and the rest of them are like,
that's also happening.
The rest of them are fully they fully recognize that they may not make it back from this mission, and this communication officer, you fully recognize that he's fully planning on getting back to Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When the rest of them are like, I will die for this mission, which is what you should be on a mission to the fucking sun.
Yeah. Which is also a cool thing that I didn't really talk about. It's like most movies that take place in space are going into unexplored regions of space that we're unfamiliar with and alien to us. This is the only movie I think that has ever been made and will ever be made where they're like, let's go to the sun, the center of all life on Earth, the reason that we can eat and breathe and live. It's pretty.
Is it all gas? It's all gas, right? Like if you could stand the heat, you could go through the sun, right?
No, I think it has a core. I think it has a very small, like, molten ball.
Nobody knows.
I don't know if anybody knows what's inside the sun. There's theories, obviously, but
a black hole.
The sun is basically like a giant, like, ball of.
It is a ball of gas, but from what I understand, it has like a metallic, like, core. That's the theory.
Nucleus.
Pretty much, right? It is kind of a nucleus unto itself.
Also, quick side note: did you guys get a little bit of Bond from '64? That level with when they're in the payload or something, and the floor is all tiled, and then there's like an angled stairwell. It reminded me of one of those levels from Bond '64.
The Aztec temple.
It's like a big, I think so. Yeah, with the big
complex.
Yeah.
The library. I forget all them.
Well, no, the complex has the little like crow's nest. The library is a library, and I think you're thinking of the Aztec temple with like the center room, and then like you go down off the sides.
Yeah, that's the one.
I haven't played fucking James Bond, and I played the remake, the remaster a little bit, but I haven't played multiplayer in 30 years.
Hey, did you guys know that every second the sun's core fuses about 600 million tons of hydrogen and helium?
Whoa.
Every second.
Whoa, like right now, and then like right now, and then
I'm
like
talking right now.
Now.
It also converts 4 million tons of matter into energy every second.
And that's not just a theory. Well, it is actually just a theory because we can't have no way of really knowing.
But yeah, it's basically a ball of hydrogen fusion. That's what it is. So it's just like nuclear energy. It's crazy.
Basically just a ball of fusion. Yeah, because that makes sense. Hydrogen fusion.
It's just energy. It's just a ball of energy. So, sorry, where are we here in this story?
They get back to the ship.
Chris Evans
get
is
back to the
partially
ship.
frozen, not fully frozen.
Yeah, he gets a big frozo hand, which is crazy. Then the psychiatrist, he goes into the sunroom on the other ship, on the Icarus One, and he does what he's been wanting to do forever, which is expose himself to 100% of the sun's light.
Yeah.
I love how they didn't wait either. They're like, they calm to him. They're like, all right, we gotta go.
Yeah, we love you and we'll
go
miss
to the
you.
payload.
And he's
He's
already
just
like, shut up.
Yeah.
I got my shades on. They're fusing to my face as we speak.
But like his kind of like character, well, it kind of starts right away, but he's like, it's like a drug addict kind of mentality, where like
that's what
we're
I'm
talking
saying.
about. Like,
I was just gonna say,
if we're talking about identities, like his identity was like the helper guy, and then he's like, but now I'm like drinking too much or something, so he's like going to this sun thing. But it's not like I don't think his role gets
he got high off his own supply.
He's got the scar. He's got the sunburn all over his face. We see that when they're on the Icarus One. That's when we see him close up, and he's got the fucking his nose is all sunburnt.
But I don't think it compromised his job though. It might have made his job better because he had a few good points.
Yeah, it's not that he's losing his mind; it's that his mind is being exposed to things that he's unfamiliar with, and it's making him more curious. But I think that if he was to be in Pinbacker's position, alone on the ship, constantly staring at it for long enough, he would go crazy as well, right? He would probably start to think that the sun was talking to him and telling him that, "Don't worry, Doc, we're coming." Yeah,
the sun tells me to burn things.
Yeah.
But before, like when they went over, like they lose all those plants, right? So the other identity kind of death, it's like the plant ladies loses all their plants, and she's very upset because we're about to get to the part in the plot where she finds
one tiny little plant left. Yeah,
and like her excitement of it, she's like, "I have purpose again."
Yep. And this coincides with the sort of realization that Pinbacker's on the ship, which is interesting as well.
I thought that it was a reveal because I obviously didn't know that there was going to be a horror element with like a, Jason kind of murderer. I thought it was like there's a pregnancy on board because Cillian Murphy and Rose Byrne were like kind of together, right? It's not that happy. Yeah. It's the opposite of that.
It's also like it's not even really necessarily a romance, right? It's like there's like a budding romance there, but it's not. It's not a. At no point in the movie are you like, oh, this is going to turn into a romantic tale. But
I was like, oh man, this is the ship revealing that he's a father, but no. And then I was like, oh, it's revealing that he's going crazy and seeing a burnt man. No, it's none of that. The burnt man was real. He's a stowaway from the Icarus One. He was surviving on the sustenance of that perfectly formed forest.
Yeah, it's also kind of weird to think of like a burnt naked man walking around on an empty ship, like every once in a while just eating a granola bar or something.
Yeah, that's
like what is he doing over
having
there?
Some water?
Eating? Yeah. He probably has to drink lots of water if he's just burning his flesh every day.
Then doing a weird sermon to those like corpses.
Yeah.
About how he's God and also the sun is God and don't tempt God. And
yeah, we also have the moment the next sort of difficult decision that they have to make, which is we know that we have enough air left on the ship for a couple of us to be able to make it to the sun, but we definitely don't have enough to get back, and we definitely don't have enough to get to the sun if we don't lose one person. And so they decide after a very long and kind of like heart-wrenching scene where like they all have to agree or they're not going to do it to kill Benedict Wong, whose character's name I can't remember.
Trey,
right. And they all say yes, except for Rose Burns, who says, absolutely not. I am not saying yes to this. If you guys kill him, you kill him, but you're not doing it with my blessing because this is murder. Like that's fucked. Like I'm not saying yes. So Chris Evans.
I love how they decide like it needs to be unanimous, and she's like, I'm not doing that. So Chris Evans is like, well, doing it anyway.
Yes. Unanimous enough for me.
Yes.
Let me get my vibrating giant scalpel.
And then he goes and she says, "Make it easy for him," which is, kind, I guess. And he says,
What
of
is her
course.
job on the ship? Is she the pilot?
Her and
I don't
Michelle
remember
Yeoh
what her
seemed like
role
the
is.
not pilots, but like the
She is the
Data
pilot.
and
Yeah,
Worf.
she's the space
Her
vessel's pilot. Yeah.
Data and Geordi.
It's weird because like everybody has a very clear position, but there are others on the ship who you immediately know what their job is because it is so in your face the entire time. Like Michelle Yeoh takes care of all, like she's the botanist, because she is in a room full of plants for the majority of the movie. Like,
but
yeah,
she
we
is
know what her
also in
job
that
is.
like cockpit with Rose Byrne when they're talking to her.
True, yes. But yeah, she's the botanist. Where's her here? Where is Michelle Yeoh? Oh, I just saw her.
See Michelle
she's a
Yeoh.
biologist and she takes care of the oxygen garden. Yeah, that's her main.
See Michelle
position.
Yeoh was awesome when she walks in because she's so prevalent right now because of Everything Everywhere All at Once. She's had such.
She was actually supposed to be the captain when they originally were casting her, and she was like, "I don't think that I have enough tenure in terms of like not that she's not old enough and not that she doesn't have enough experience in acting, but she just felt like in the circle of characters that they've got, it made more sense for her to be sort of a caretaker and
that sucks. And that's the spotlight was kind of put on that when she won the Oscar this last year because she has such a crazy body of work that just because the Academy is racist old white men that she couldn't have her flowers earlier. It sucks. Mm-hmm. Like she's such a good actor. Most people know her from Crouching Tiger, but she pops up. She pops up in so much stuff. Like when I saw her in this, I was like, oh shit! Like of course she's in this. She's a fucking fantastic actor.
She plays a fortune-telling goat in Kung Fu Panda 2. She's a very funny character. She constantly is eating people's clothes, like while they're like in the middle of a speech, and they'll like look over and she'll be like nibbling on someone's robes. Anywho, so we get to the point now where Chris Evans goes to kill Benedict Wong's character Trey, and he goes to get a scalpel. And when he opens the drawer, we notice that there are already 2 scalpels missing. And it's such a predominant shot that you can't help but be like, why are there 2 missing? And you find out where one of them is immediately. Mm-hmm. It's in Trey's hands after he has slit his own wrists in the holodeck room or whatever, the little therapy cube that lets you go watch people at an ocean bank getting hit by waves or whatever Chris Evans is watching for some reason.
Yeah, crashing waves.
Yeah, that was cool. I think that if you went to your therapy session and you could go into a holodeck and experience something like that, it would be interesting because the guy that's early in the movie, he's even like, turn down the waves crashing, and Chris Mace is like, no, I like that's actually soothing to me. That chaos is like soothing to him.
Yeah,
which is kind of his character. He's very like, he doesn't want to pass the buck. He says that in this last scene. He's like, I don't pass the buck. I'll go kill him myself.
Yeah,
and you get the sense that this guy's a very no nonsense guy, but at the same time, he did let his hair grow out, and he was like trying to fist fight his fucking his co. Like it seemed like they were friends at one point too. They seemed very familiar with each other. Him and
yeah,
Kappa.
I think that if 2 people scrap with each other that often and haven't murdered one another, then there's probably like deep down there's a deeper connection there if 2 people are kind of willing.
They want
to
fuck each other.
Go at it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't want to just fist fight. They want to fist fuck.
They want to fist fuck. Up to the elbow, buddy. Nope. Whoops.
So yeah, they find out that Trey has already committed suicide, or in other words, or other theory is that potentially Pinbacker, like you were saying, Matt, gave him the tools that he needed to commit suicide. It would be an interesting thing to see, and because it's not really ambiguous so much as it would be an interesting thing to have a crazy religious zealot who's completely burned, like talking to like a person who's so drugged up.
The 2 reasons why I think Pinbacker did it is 1, because he was in the sedation chamber thing, and 2,
He
I don't
also
know if
had the scalpel. He would have had to have gone in there to get the scalpel.
What?
He has the other missing scalpel, so he would have had to have gone in there to get the scalpel, right? So like,
Yeah, true.
he would
The
have
other
either
thing,
seen he would have either seen Trey, or he, like we were saying, like provided Trey with the scalpel to kill himself, or
Right.
killed him, straight up killed him, maybe.
Well, that's what I'm kind of leaning more towards. And the other, I guess, clue or whatever for me was like the blood splatter on the wall. I thought that kind of seemed out of place if he did it to himself. But I also don't know how blood projectiles out of your arm when you do that.
I don't
With
know
a buzzy scalpel.
With a crazy vibro blade, yeah. It's like those knives in The Mandalorian that are like... yeah, and we get a moment of calm where they are like, all right, we're back on the mission, until we are seeing Michelle Yeoh find the plant, and she's so happy about it. But we're also seeing Kappa be told by the computer that there's not enough oxygen to complete the mission. And he's like, well, no, we did. There's, it's like, we only have enough oxygen for 4 people. He's like, there are 4 people. I was like, no, there are 5 people. It's like, who's the 5th person? The computer's like, I don't know.
I don't fucking know. You figure it out.
I'm just a computer.
I'm just a computer.
So yeah, at this point, they now start to realize what's going on, and Michelle Yeoh is murdered by another scalpel, and we get to see finally who it is, but we have the computer tell him where the person is, and he's on the observation deck, the sunroom, and we go there and we get our first look at Pinbacker. And
sort of.
if it's it's crazy to me that Mark Strong had to go into like full body makeup probably for like 6-7 hours before every day of shooting, only to be obscured by radiation.
Did you guys
so
have
intense
that
the camera can't pick him up?
Did you guys have that thing, like in a normal monster movie, in a normal like Jason or Freddy Krueger, eventually, like they hint at it, eventually you see it perfectly, like you just see what the monster looks like. Monster movies do too, like Cloverfield's a good example where you just see parts of it, finally just see it. They never really show him, and it drove me crazy. They showed him like kind of from far away a couple times, like pretty good, but you never get that, like you just fucking see what the whole model looks like. And I guess that was done because most of his scenes happen in that like that time dilation vortex moment. That's sort of like, it's just things are happening. It's very crazy. It's very like, it's like hard sci-fi when they're, on that cube. But when he's drudging around the ship, you'd think that we get one good look at him.
Yeah, and I think that was it's kind of a curiosity to me where I'm like, I wonder if they shot all of his stuff with that intention, where they're like, we're never actually going to see him, and anytime he's on frame, we're going to obscure him. The effect that they use reminds me of like when you're trying to look at something, but the sun is like setting or something, or rising, and it's like, it's fucking like when you're trying to drive and like the sun is there and you're like
a dusk or dawn.
Yeah, it's kind of, it reminded me of that. I'm not sure if that was what they were trying to achieve, but it also, in my brain, I'm like, he's so radioactive from being just like completely bombarded by the sun's radiation that,
I like that
the camera can't even pick him up because he's so like energized with sunbeams. Yeah, I don't know, but I do think it's an interesting choice. I get what you mean, because I would love to see what he looks like clear as day as well, but I like that they decided to do something kind of weird with it. Yeah, so we get a little scene where Kappa confronts Pinbacker, and Pinbacker basically goes on a religious rant saying that, like, God is calling to us and he'll take us, and I will be the last living being of his creation before he like lets me into heaven or whatever the fuck he does a lot of rambling, but it's intimidating and it's intense and it's cool. And Mark Strong, he's such like a big man, but he always plays horrifying villains, and like 90% of his roles are like scary people.
I was just Googling if there was any images of him like on this set.
Yeah. Does it look bad? Maybe it looks so bad that they're like, we gotta do something about this.
So I Google Mark Strong on the set of Sunshine. The second thing that comes up is a Reddit link. It says Mark Strong in Sunshine. So I click on it, and it's just a picture of the leprechaun. Oh yeah.
I assumed it would be like that like a shot from Freddy's Dead where he's like ripping his shirt off and he's got a bunch of like little faces all over his burnt torso. So this is where the movie, once again, this is another Home Alone moment, where the movie kicks off into now just like a monster chase for essentially the rest of the film. And they're also arriving at the sun during this, which is ramps the tension even more. So they've arrived at the sun. Pinbacker's revealed himself, and it's a race to the core to try and basically release the bomb into the sun. But they need to get a final kick, and the engines have all been removed from the coolant. So the engines are overheating, and Chris Evans has to go in there and manually lower them into the coolant. And this is where his leg gets caught, and he is dragged into the freezing coolant, and he essentially drowns or freezes. I don't really know which one killed him, but he also
he's talking on comms, and then it starts going down, and then he gets stuck, and he gets I think it's implied that he kind of gets like severed in half from waist down.
Oh right.
But then he also he's actively freezing during that time, because he dives into the first one and gets it fixed, and then he comes up, and then he goes into the second one and dives down and comes up, and then he goes on comms, and then he dives back down and comes back up, and they get stuck, he gets trapped, and then he fucking freezes right, up.
And then Kappa tries to essentially trap Pinbacker on the ship, releases the coupler, and the ship burns away. So he thinks that once again for a moment he's safe, but he finds.
Does that mean the mission was never actually, like, they were never going to survive anyway? Because it seemed like that getaway time frame was not, because the ship part of it got deteriorated at that point, right?
I think it's because the shield, like, it went like sideways, decoupled, right? So like, there was probably a way. I'm like, how do they turn the ship around?
Everything goes fucked right from Benedict Wong's character, like, fucking up. Like, if everything went to plan, they had a certain way that they had to approach the sun, and then drop the payload. But because they tried to turn and go, like, essentially, like, to the right, down to Mercury, and he did it wrong, then everything. Because I think what they were trying to do was turn so the shield stays, and then the ship turns, and then they can move down towards Mercury. But that all got fucked, and it all turned the wrong way by just a degree, just enough to, like, singe part of the shield. So there's also that on top of it. The shield was already had structural damage to it. So it wasn't great. It wasn't a good time for anybody.
So we get another moment where he enters the bomb room again, the big giant cube room, and Pinbacker has another little speech where he basically says that he's been talking to God for the last 7 years, and that God told him to deliver humanity to heaven for him or whatever. And some crazy ass shit. And
some crazy ass final boss nonsense.
Yeah, and then he lifts Kappa up over the. I assume that the gravity's all wonky in here, which is why he's able to lift another human being up with one hand, like fucking Darth Vader. But he then gets all the skin ripped off like a sleeve.
His arm gets degloved. It reminded me of The Walking Dead. Yeah, it was great.
There's a lot of good effects in this movie. Actually, that looks really good.
I remember when I saw that in theaters, just being like.
Yeah, it would have been so big, like on a giant fucking.
And the noise it makes,
yeah,
and it does like it kind of like does that like pause, like effect for a moment where you're just like seeing it happen in different angles. Yeah, and then they fall down the side of the cube, but because the gravity of this cube it has its own mass, and its own gravitational pull, they basically like stop halfway down. It's a pretty cool set piece, but kind of discombobulating as well to watch. And then he goes into the bomb room to ignite the bomb, and he manages to reach the controls. But there's something going on where he's not sure if it's going to work or not. But it's hectic. I can't really remember. But he ignites it, and we basically get a moment where the explosion comes all around his being and like freezes on him, and I assume he's already dead when like the light is going into his eyes and the sunshine is all around him. But like basically it's implied, I guess, that they're on the surface of the sun at that point. And then it's he has like this.
I think it implies that like because they talked about the like going down and like space and time all meld and blah blah blah. Like
that's how I interpret it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I interpreted, it was like the event horizon, like the time stopped, and it's like he's just at that wall.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those moments in a movie where you're like, okay, cool, visually cool, but I'm not 100% sure what's going on right now. And then it cuts back to the Earth. Cillian has his speech again, basically the same speech from the beginning of the movie, where he says, if you look up one day and it's a particularly bright day outside or nice day outside, you'll know that we completed our mission. And then the sun gets slightly brighter, and it doesn't really show any of the actors too much. It's just more focused on the landscape of snow. And this is where we realize that's Australia. Holy shit! It doesn't snow there, does it? And the movie ends, and we made it to the end of Sunshine. Anything that you guys want to mention from the movie from your notes or anything before we move into the last leg of our journey?
Not so much. I think interestingly, there was a lot to talk about, but it wasn't a movie where we could meander too much, because when movies go from one thing to the next like that, it's pretty cut and dry in what's happening. The only times that I felt like I didn't really know were basically after Pinbacker is introduced, and they're all crazy, and like half the people are dead. After that, there's a lot of interpretation that can be left open. Other than that, I think we covered all of it. Either Pinbacker was just doing murder things. Two things could have happened. Trey could have decoupled, Pinbacker got on, and then started systematically killing people. Or Pinbacker just like squeezed by them, went on the ship, and just started wreaking havoc. We'll never really know. I think that's kind of part of it. I think we're supposed to sort of wonder. I think that in my head, I was wondering if Trey actually killed himself, or it was made to look like he killed himself, but I don't think it makes sense for like a serial killer kind of character to make it look like somebody killed himself. I think it's more likely that he was given the tools to do so, because he was already very much on that trajectory. But other than that, like, I think we went through the plot very succinctly, and I appreciate that, because sometimes we can get kind of lost in the details, and we moved through the plot. A lot
happens in this movie too, right? Like,
yeah,
it almost seems like the type of movie that they could take the concept and stretch it into like a
mini, like remake it into like a mini series or something. I also feel like this is one of those ones where rewatch this movie over and over and over, because there might be stuff that you missed. And I think the one viewing that I had, I didn't get as much out of it as you guys, even having only a second or third viewing, like you were able to see it from these different perspectives.
Also, I think Matt, myself, like, we have that sort of like almost 15 years gone since we saw it in theaters, and it's like doesn't have the same sort of impact, and the implication is a little bit different. I feel like in 2007, like, humanity had a little bit more like a brighter perspective on life than now.
So many things have happened since 2007.
Oh my god, yeah. It's just blowing my mind that certain areas of our planet are going backwards, like centuries backwards, in terms of like the laws that are being made and stuff.
Yeah, anyway. Especially our neighbors to the south.
The like timeline is interesting, like 2057. So in 2007, maybe that seemed feasible that we'd have these giant ships in 40 years.
It's almost 2027 now. You know what I mean? Like, and we don't, like, we have the cell phones increase in technology, and that's about it. We don't have a lot of different technology.
I heard someone say once that it's really easy to predict what the world will look like in 5 years, but like very hard to predict what the world will look like in 10 years. It's like, okay, we know kind of what's coming around the corner in 5 years, but then it's like,
I think
so at 2007, being like, what's gonna happen in 50 years?
the introduction of AI over the last couple of years might speed certain things up a little bit to make things seem a little bit more sci-fi by 2057. But I don't think we're gonna be alive in 2057, and I don't think things are gonna be that much different. You know, it's gonna be
the sun's gonna be
the sun is definitely is nowhere near gonna burn out. This is an alternate timeline where the sun is older.
Is there anything in terms of like technology in the movie that you're like, I don't think so? Not in 50 years.
The like holodeck thing, it could have just been like a VR headset.
Yeah. Like I do fully think that like augmented reality will be crazy in 2057, possibly be able to go into a room like that, but I don't really see how based on our current VR technology is so fucking primitive still. It hurts to put the headset on, like ow, and then you get like motion sickness. They haven't really figured out like that part of it yet, you know.
And then you get all sweaty.
Yeah,
super.
Just like just around your eye sockets are just like matted.
I had that PSVR 1, and I have the PSVR 2, and they've improved a lot. It's a smaller headset, and you don't get the motion sickness as bad. But I remember when I had the VR PSVR 1, and I got Skyrim, and I was like, this is going to revolutionize everything. I'm going to be in Skyrim, and I'm going to take a little nap by a river, you know? And it's not like that at all. I just put it on and felt gross immediately. Like, ugh, nope, I'm good.
Yeah. Cool. I guess we can go into what went well.
I got one more thing to add.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So during the credits, they basically do a recap of the movie, like alongside the credits, which at first I found kind of like annoying, sort of.
You're like, is this a blooper reel?
Well, that's the thing, right? Because it wasn't even. But so like on the other hand, though, I was like, okay, you know what? That's actually not that bad of an idea. For you see this movie, you're like, what the fuck? What did I just watch? And then this kind of gives you a quick little recap of it all to kind of maybe put little pieces together. But also a bit of a to instigate you to stay and stay for the credits as well, because all those people are important to the final product as well. And then also it goes from the top to the bottom, almost like a sunrise sunset kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm telling you though, man. Sometimes watching the credits is worth it, just to like. It's not in a Marvel movie because they're like 20 minutes long, but they put something at the end to make you want to stay, but you're not reading it.
They're always so disappointing now.
But like, well, when we did like the John Carpenter months, I would always watch, because I would be like, I want to get to the stunt coordinators because I want to see if Dick Warlock also worked on this movie. The guy's name is Dick Warlock.
That's a great name. It's almost like Dick Wolf.
Yeah.
Except he didn't.
Dick Warlock sounds like you're a magician that cast spells specifically on dicks.
Penis magic. Love
Dick Warlock. All right. So, anything else? Any last mentions anybody wants to make?
I can't believe I sat for 10 minutes into this movie before Chris Evans cuts his hair, and fucking was like, that looks so much like Chris Evans, but there's no way he's in this. Then he shaves his head. He's like, that's undeniably Chris Evans.
I mean, he'd been acting, and he was already a Human Torch at this point. Right?
No, I get that, but like, I always perceived this movie as like a more of an indie flick, and I didn't realize it had like a middle of the road budget, and I didn't know it was Danny Boyle till like yesterday. Also,
yeah, Danny Boyle is an interesting director. All of his movies, he seems like one of those directors who's like, I want to make one of every genre. Throughout my career, like I want to make
kind of a John Carpenter in that respect. Then
yeah, that's a good call, but nobody compares to John Carpenter.
No, John Carpenter is the fucking man.
The best.
He makes all the music for his movies too. Like, who does that?
Yeah, crazy person, but in a good way.
A genius.
The genius
of B movies.
Yeah. Let's move on to our what went well, what could be better, and final thoughts. Matt, why don't you start us off as our guest?
Yeah, I thought there was like some inconsistencies with what's his face, Captain America, and his character a bit. With the whole like, he was so rational, and then he sends Cillian Murphy out, but it's like that seemed like an off choice. I thought like when he's like, I volunteer. I volunteer cat. It just seemed like not his character, as he's like so fighting for rationality in all other aspects. So I always found that part was off, and it still felt that it was off. I don't know. So I don't know what the reason is behind that though. I guess it would be spite, but then that doesn't meet his character either. It's like he shouldn't care about that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like, yeah, is he that mad about the phone call? Is he still mad about the phone call, or is he actually upset that he's the one that made the call to move the ship?
Yeah. Yeah, but even that, like his character was like always made the rational choices. And I felt like Rose Byrne's character was kind of pointless. She didn't really.
It would have been
didn't really have a role to my.
Yeah,
to
she's kind of also a forgettable character. Like, yeah, I watched it so recently, and I'm like, I don't really remember anything that she.
Her name's Cassie. I remember that.
She was basically there to like coax monologues out of Cillian Murphy.
She's kind of the like girl character.
I'm a girl.
Like Michelle Yeoh has stuff to do as a woman, and she's kind of like the girl, like the teen girl character.
This movie also is the reason that she was in 28 Weeks Later, and she rules in that movie. So. And
she's great. Like Rose Byrne's a great actor, so like,
yeah.
So you got to start somewhere.
Yep.
Like everyone, how I mentioned before, like everyone kind of had like their role, and they all kind of lose their role. So like the comms officer loses his role. Trey screws up his role and loses his role. The botanist, all the plants die, so she loses her role. The psychologist guy kind of gives up his role, I guess. I don't know. But then, yeah, so it's like she didn't really have a role to even like lose, it seemed like. I don't know. Yeah, and the ship kind of seemed to pilot itself, but I guess maybe she was there for specific reasons that we don't know about. And your final thoughts on the movie? So when I watched it recently, I felt like I had the sense that it didn't hold up. I wasn't as excited as it once was. It's still a good movie, but I wasn't as excited as obviously when I first came out of watching that movie. I was like blown away. But I think that was early in my kind of, finding cool movies.
Yeah, that was around the time that we were getting into film in like a real way, and not just like let's go to the movies every single Sunday. But
let's go see the whatever blockbuster that's out. It's like
Well, there was a good chunk of time for like 5 years where you and I and Andrew would go to the movies like every Sunday, and if it wasn't all three of us, it was two of us. It would be like every week. We saw so many movies, man. Like so many movies that like even if there was nothing you wanted to see, we would just be like, I guess we'll go see this, and then you would just watch a really shitty like House of the Dead or something like that. You're like, why are we watching this?
See, post COVID, like I want to start doing that. Madison got one of those. Cineplex has almost like a Netflix kind of thing where you get like so many free movies a month, and we don't utilize it, but we should. And I would just like to go see fucking regular ass movies. I do want to see Beau is Afraid, but I am afraid to see Beau is Afraid in theaters. Like, it might scar me a little because of the way that man makes movies.
Yeah, the Ari Aster movies, both of them have at least one scene in them that like I find unwatchable. It's so hard.
Sticks with you, man.
Yeah, I remember watching Hereditary and the moment where off camera she finds the daughter, and just like the emotion is like it's insane, and it's like goes on, and you feel it feels real. I remember I tried to watch it a second time, and that scene was about to happen, and I turned the movie. I was like, I forgot it. I can't deal with this right now. I never went back.
Final thoughts. When you asked me to do this, I was like, oh yeah, like love that movie. And I was like, maybe I'll watch it again with like a psychologist kind of lens on it. It'd be like, I want to see if I can pull out weird kind of things, because it is kind of a psychological thriller. But yeah, it's still a good movie. Good characters. I think when I've described this movie to other people, it's like you can't describe what the movie is actually about. Like it's about the sun is dying and they're going to blow it up. It's like, but that's not what the movie's about.
No, yeah.
So like you have to skip over that part.
It's almost embarrassing. to like when you want to try and explain it to somebody in terms of like what the actual plot is. You're like, oh, I don't want to say this because it makes it sound like a
makes
a
it sound
movie
like
for jocks.
Armageddon.
Yeah.
Yeah, Armageddon.
So
Yeah.
you like Armageddon? No, not like Armageddon.
Not like Armageddon. No, it's not like horse.
But no, it's I like it. I'll give it 2.
Out of
2. Yeah.
Out of what?
2 things.
Okay.
2 shakes of a lamb's tail.
Yep.
All right. Cool. Kaylin, why don't you go next?
Oh, thank you. So I enjoyed it enough. Much like our last episode, I did find that and we mentioned this earlier, the third act had a different tone than the first 2. I also didn't really feel invested in any one particular character, which I think may have lost me a little bit, or could have helped if there was kind of like one main character to kind of latch onto. We mentioned earlier the visual effects were on point, which is my what went well. My even better, I put get rid of the second Icarus storyline and maybe take elements from that and incorporate it on the one ship. And
I think for that it would have been really difficult to achieve. I think that's why they did it, right? Like,
well, you mentioned earlier that one of the crewmates shouldn't go crazy, but why not?
I mean,
they could have just elongated the story more. It didn't have to take place over whatever few weeks. It could have been over the course of like a few years and let it
for
like,
sure
like
have
when
to have some time jumps.
That
I think if they like
cool.
what we were saying, if they were to turn it into like a television series, I think they could achieve it quite
That'd be awesome.
competently.
I think that would work really well.
But I think that the idea of finding a ghost ship is also really cool. Like just as a concept, like finding a dead ship in space is exciting.
It adds that element which leads to the mess up by Trey or whatever. Like I understand the reason for it, but it also kind of felt a little like convoluted as a whole. But all in all, I'd say it's worth a watch, and I give it your family and friends pouring over you in the form of light.
Oh, jeez. All right. Jason, why don't you go next?
Oh, also MPAA 43-132.
Nice. That's interesting because there's been about 10,000 movies from this movie to Guardians 3. I've noticed that now that we talk about the MPAA rating. That's so fucking weird. It's been about 10,000 rated movies because it was
crazy.
like 53 something. This movie was incredible. This hit me in a very similar way to the first time I watched Event Horizon, which was also very recently. I think I like Event Horizon more, and obviously we'll talk about that next week, but I enjoy how there's like so many twists and turns constantly, which I mentioned, and each act didn't feel like an act. It felt like an episode of a 3-part miniseries. Like it felt like a TV show. And I think to your point, Steve, like if you expanded this into a full miniseries, maybe like a 7 or 8 part like HBO like high cost miniseries, and really like kind of like a Last of Us, and started from the beginning and did the time jumps like that you guys were mentioning in the last little bit, this could be really something special and a cool thing to like. Because you're right, nobody ever goes to the sun. It's like, dude, we stay away from the sun. It's gonna burn you.
Seems like an impossible place to go.
Yeah. The cast, all tremendous. I wrote their names out, but we already covered that at the beginning of the show, so I'm not going to do that again. It's crazy to see a lot of these actors before they were mega famous, and you really see that they're all in pivotal points of their career. Where they're acting the shit. They're not chewing the scenery. They're doing the opposite. They're doing very subtle, good acting. This is a good exploration of taking a minimal script and really just maximizing what you can do with it. Because there's not a lot to this movie. There's a series of things happening, but the acting is a linchpin because like. You need to like make it feel believable, or else it's gonna feel like it's gonna feel like Deep Blue Sea, or it's going to feel like Sphere if you don't execute it correctly. I had forgotten that this movie was a horror sci-fi, or I never really knew. I always thought it was.
I don't think even going in, the trailers didn't advertise it that way. It was just like
I always thought it was like a high concept sci-fi, like that, like a psychological thriller, more
like
so
Solaris or something.
Yeah, or like Ad Astra or whatever. I don't know if that's that.
Dad Astra.
Dad ass. The tension building in this movie is like unparalleled. I'd never really get that like sense of foreboding in movies. I'm always watching a movie going, I guess so. Especially like the horror movies we watch a lot of the time don't really get that out of me. But there were scenes like when they first go into the Icarus One, and you get that, you're lulled into sort of a sense of comfortable. They mentioned the fact about the dust, and then he knocks some shit down a fucking ladder, and it makes a huge clang. Like I'm like at my desk at work on my lunch break watching this movie, and I'm like, ugh! So the tension was great, and it kept me engaged. I give it a solid 4.3 out of 5. I know you guys are whatever on my review scale.
It wasn't a critique of you.
You gave me a 2 out of 5 on my critique scale.
My opinion of number ratings is.
I know that's fair.
Who needs it?
It's me keeping consistent with my Instagram reviews, but I do give this movie a set of shades that try to block out the sun, but the light is just too bright.
Yes. All right. My opinion of this movie is high.
Yeah. Hey, did you see this one?
Yeah. I think for my what went well, I think the pacing is really good. I think that the special effects hold up in ways that I did not expect. I think that the design of everything is really interesting and cool. And I think that in terms of like what went well the best, I think I gotta say, man, I think my favorite part of the whole movie is the sound design on the distress call. I think it's the coolest shit I ever heard. What could have been better? I do think that it does start to get a little bit unhinged at the end in a way that it makes it kind of jarring to understand what's happening in terms of the science of it all. For a movie that kind of takes itself very seriously in terms of presenting the science to us without trying to sugarcoat it or explain it to us like a layman, it kind of gets a little bit confusing in terms of what's happening, for me at least. And I've seen the movie more than a couple times. That's not necessarily to say that I want them to pause. Everyone stop for a minute and let's explain this to the audience, because it's like, it's just a visual cacophony of crazy shit happening at the end. So you're not really meant to be thinking about like what exactly is happening here. You're supposed to be like, oh my god, that guy's skin just came off. That's what you're thinking about. But I do think that the movie achieves a lot of things that it set out to do. I do like the fact that they had Brian Cox as sort of like a consultant on the science. It's always nice when they take the time to do stuff like that. And I think that Danny Boyle and Brian Cox are like actually buddies IRL. So like, I want Danny Boyle to make another sci-fi. Maybe if this 28-week, he doesn't really do sequels though, right? Or wait, he did Trainspotting too. So maybe that's a lie.
Is that out?
Oh yeah,
it just came out recently, right? Yeah,
it came out years ago.
But
years ago, yeah,
it did.
I think it came out before Trump was in office. But yeah, I think that the movie is very good. I do recommend it to people, and I think that if you ever read the synopsis and hear that it's a movie where people are bringing a nuclear bomb to the sun to restart the sun's engine, just don't think about that part.
Ignore that part.
It's a character study. It's an interesting.
It's a good movie just to want, and not have any concept of what it's about.
Yeah, I agree.
Like those like kind of surprising movies. Like I want to go into watching this, and I have no idea what's about.
Absolutely, go into this blind. Go into all the movies this month blind. In fact, they're all very much like that.
Yeah, when I was watching Sphere, Danny was like, "What is this movie about?" And I was like, "I can't say anything, or it'll ruin."
Kind of ruins it, yeah.
Yeah. But Sunshine is the same way. When we went to go see it for the first time, I didn't know what. All I knew was the bomb concept, and I was like, "Oh, this will probably be dumb."
The
And I
bomb
watched it, and I was like, "This is dope. This movie's dope." Yeah. What I give this movie is a successful mission to dump a payload, a nuclear bomb the size of Massachusetts into the sun. It's a good movie. It succeeds in everything it tries to do, and I don't think that there's too many failures within it.
I would like to underline how good this fucking movie is. Like, it's just
I
so
hesitate
good.
to say perfect, but I think it is. It's very close to like reaching my like stringent sort of like rules of what makes a movie perfect, and it almost meets them all.
Like, I never give a 5, and 4.5 is kind of my 5. To 4.3 is, you know what, like, it's a dumb scale. I know. I'm working on it. I've been working on it for years. But I agree with you fully. Like, it checked so many boxes. I couldn't stop watching it. Like, I want to watch it again. Like, I know I say that sometimes and then I don't, but this is like...
Well, they should make an actual list of boxes to be checked off.
I will.
I mean,
I think it's a movie that's hard to watch again because. So I think what made it like lackluster for me when I watched it all the way through again is the ending kind of crazy third act where it like loses that surprise. It goes into this like, oh, here's the jarring, weird, fast camera part, and you're like, all right, like for me, like the movie's over now. To stop it right there.
That's a
good
point.
The build up.
What about like showing it to somebody who's never seen it?
Exactly. Yeah. So I've had fun showing this to people like, oh, you've never seen this movie. Actually, like it just recalled in my mind. I have this movie on DVD. Like I bought it a long time ago.
Yeah, this is one of the first Blu-rays I bought, and I watched it a ton of times when it first came out, and then I just didn't watch it for like 10 years.
And it was one of those movies I was like, oh, you haven't seen this movie? Gotta watch this movie. And I'd show it to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then watching it alone again, I don't know. They ending the whatever pinbacker when he comes in.
That's a good point.
I get excited about that still because I think it's cool. And when I am showing this movie to people who haven't seen it, I get excited for them to have the realization of what's going on because it is a pretty exciting thing.
Yeah.
But
I think, unless anybody has any final thoughts they'd like to add, I think that brings us to the end.
That Rose Byrne is going to go places. What'd you say, Kaylin?
I was just helping Steve remember the order.
Yeah.
So, for Kaylin, for Jason, for Matthew, I'm Steven.
For Kaylin, for Matthew, for Steven, I'm Jason.
For Jason and Steven and Matthew, I'm Kellen.
You can say it if you want, Matt. You don't have to, though. Okay. Hey, I got a question for you.
Hey, what's the question?
No. Hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see that? Oh.
God. See this one?
What? What?
I don't know if we're still on the screen right now, but something's happened
the box
to Matt.
Say, hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see this one?
I call my toilet the sun.
I've been dumping loads in the sun since before time.
Hey, this is fun. I hope I added value. I am sweating my buckets right now.